My first recollection is of seeing my mom's belly become bigger every day while I sat on our faded blue couch with my legs hanging over the side. My parents continued promising me that I will soon get a younger brother or sister when I was 7 years old. In my heart, I wanted a sibling. Mom used to say, "Nellie, come feel," taking my little hand and putting it on her round tummy. When I felt the little kicks, I would picture a buddy, someone with whom I could play dolls, or someone who would admire me. However, everything changed with the birth of my brother Ethan. The day they brought him home is still fresh in my mind. Mom was strolling next to Dad, looking delighted yet exhausted, while he carried this small baby covered in a blue blanket. Dad continued, "Come meet your brother, Nellie," with a pride in his voice that I had never heard before. I looked at the red-faced, wrinkled infant. To be honest, he was not that attractive. My parents, however, pretended that he was made of gold. "Our son," Dad would remark to guests. Finally an heir to the family name. I sensed the change right away, even though I didn't know what it meant at the time. I was outside staring and all of a sudden, I assumed it was just because newborns require a lot of care during the first several months. When she saw me making dejected looks during art class, my teacher, Miss Parker, gave me an explanation. "Nellie, your folks are simply preoccupied with the baby. They still have the same affection for you." Miss Parker was mistaken, though. It was completely different. I was the top student in my class on a maths test when Ethan was starting to walk. I rushed home with a large A+ at the top, stars, and a paper in my hand. "Dad, Mom, look at what I have." I burst through the front door and yelled. They were recording Ethan as he walked shakily between them when I discovered them in the living room. "That's it, champion." My father urged me to come to Dad, utterly disregarding me. "Mom, take a look at my test," I urged, pulling at her sleeve. She gave it a fleeting glance. "That's nice, honey." "Oh, Ethan, you're doing it." As they applauded my brother for taking 3 steps without collapsing, I remained there, forgetting my accomplishment. My parents bought me a coloring book and some crayons for my 8th birthday. They invited everyone in the neighborhood, rented a bouncy castle, and hired a clown for Ethan's first birthday. As everyone swooned over my brother, I sat in the corner eating cake. The fact that I had won first place in the school's running competition only a week before was forgotten. The worst time was Christmas. Trucks, blocks, and a little electric car that he could ride around the house were among the many items that Ethan received. I received a book on being a nice big sister, along with some clothing. I would hear family members say, "You're so lucky to have a little brother like Ethan," during get-togethers. "We hit the jackpot with this little guy," Dad would say, ruffling Ethan's hair. "A son to carry on the family business someday." Mom would nod enthusiastically. "He's just like his father, strong and smart." I'd sit there wondering what that made me. Weak and dumb? The only person who seemed to notice what was happening was Aunt Sarah, Dad's older sister. She lived in Indiana while we were in Ohio. She didn't visit often, but when she did, she always made time just for me. "How's my favorite niece?" she'd ask, bringing me little gifts that showed she'd been paying attention. Art supplies when I got into drawing. A basketball when I joined the school team. Once, during Thanksgiving dinner when I was 10, the usual praising of Ethan was in full swing. "He's already reading at a 2nd grade level," Mom bragged, though it wasn't true. I helped him with his alphabet, and he could barely recognize his name. "And look at those muscles," Dad added. "He's going to be a football star." Aunt Sarah cleared her throat. "Nellie got straight A's on her report card. Did you mention that to everyone?" The table went quiet. My parents looked uncomfortable. "Well, yes, Nellie does well in school," Mom said dismissively. "You can't compare them," Dad added. "They're different children." "Exactly," Aunt Sarah said firmly. "They're both your children, and they both deserve the same love and attention." Dad's face turned red. "Sarah, you don't have children. You don't understand how parenting works." "I understand enough to know that what you're doing isn't right," she replied. After that, things got tense, and Aunt Sarah left earlier than planned. But before she went, She hugged me tight and whispered, "You're special, Nellie." Don't ever forget that. By the time I turned 12, I'd gotten used to being invisible at home. I took care of myself, made my own lunches, did my homework without help, walked to and from school alone. Ethan, now 5, couldn't tie his own shoes without mom or dad rushing to help him. One evening, I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard my parents talking in hushed tones. I stopped in the hallway, just out of sight. "We can't keep going like this, Marie," Dad said, his voice stressed. "We don't have enough financial resources to support 2 children." "What are you saying, Robert?" Mom asked. "I'm saying we need to figure something out. We need to come up with a plan." I backed away, heart pounding. I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but something about their tone made me uneasy. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I crept back to my room, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. That summer started with unexpected news. My parents announced we were all going on a trip to visit Aunt Sarah in Indiana. I couldn't believe it. They almost never took me anywhere since Ethan was born. Family outings usually meant my staying home with Mrs. Wilson next door while they took Ethan to the zoo or the children's museum. I rushed to my room and grabbed my backpack, stuffing it with a few changes of clothes, my favorite book, and the friendship bracelet my best friend Jenny had made me. I was done in 15 minutes, bubbling with anticipation. When I came back downstairs, I noticed Mom pulling a large suitcase from the hall closet. She started filling it with more of my clothes, not just summer things, but jeans, sweaters, and even my winter coat. "Why do I need all that stuff?" I asked, watching her methodically empty my dresser drawers. "We're only going for a few days, right?" She paused, her back to me. "You never know what might be useful, Nellie. Better to be prepared." Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist, but I pushed the feeling aside. I was going to Aunt Sarah's, the aunt who always remembered my birthday, who called just to ask about my day at school, who treated me like I mattered. The drive to Indiana took nearly 4 hours. Dad kept the radio on loud, drowning out any attempts at conversation. Ethan slept most of the way, sprawled across Mom's lap in the passenger seat. I watched the landscape change through the window, Ohio's flat farmlands giving way to Indiana's rolling hills. When we finally turned onto Aunt Sarah's street, I pressed my face against the window. I'd never been to her house before, though she'd described it in her letters. It was just as she'd said, a charming 2-story white house with blue shutters and a front porch wrapped in climbing roses. Aunt Sarah was standing on the porch steps, waving as we pulled into the driveway. She looked different than when she visited us, more relaxed, her long brown hair loose around her shoulders instead of in the tight bun she usually wore. Dad parked the car and turned off the engine. An awkward silence fell over us. "Why don't you get out, Nellie?" Mom finally said. "Go say hello to your aunt." I scrambled out of the back seat and ran to Aunt Sarah, who wrapped me in a tight hug. "There's my girl," she said warmly. "I'm so glad you're here." Dad got out next, lugging my large suitcase from the trunk. He set it down heavily on the driveway, then walked over to place it on the porch. Mom joined him, leaving Ethan still asleep in the car. "Sarah," Dad nodded stiffly to his sister. "The house looks nice. Thank you for doing this." Mom added, her voice oddly formal. I looked between them, confused by the tension. "Weren't we all staying?" Aunt Sarah put her arm around my shoulders. "I prepared the blue room for you, Nellie. It has a view of the garden." Mom knelt in front of me, her hands on my arms. Her eyes looked watery. "Nellie, you're going to stay with Aunt Sarah for a while." "What? Why aren't you staying too?" The cold feeling from before returned, spreading through my chest. "No, sweetie, Dad. Ethan and I are going back home. You're going to live here with your aunt." I stared at her, not comprehending. "For how long?" She glanced at Dad, who was looking at his watch impatiently. "Just for a little while. We'll come back for you later." "But why can't I come home with you?" My voice cracked. Mom hugged me quickly. "It's complicated, Nellie. You'll understand when you're older." Dad gave me an awkward pat on the head. "Be good for your aunt." And just like that, they were walking back to the car. I watched in stunned silence as they got in. As Dad started the engine and they backed out of the driveway with my sleeping brother still in the front seat, Mom waved through the window, a small, sad gesture that made no sense alongside what they were doing. Then they were gone, leaving me standing on the porch next to my suitcase and my aunt. "Come on, honey," Aunt Sarah said gently. "Let's get you settled." I followed her numbly into the house. It was cozy inside, hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, walls lined with bookshelves. Under different circumstances, I would have loved it immediately. Aunt Sarah showed me to my room on the second floor. It was painted a soft blue with a white dresser, a desk by the window, and a bed covered with a patchwork quilt. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," she said, setting my suitcase down. "I know this is a shock, but I promise I'll take good care of you." That night, I didn't cry. I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, convinced this was just a strange extended visit. My parents would realize their mistake and come back for me. They wouldn't just leave me here permanently. They couldn't. Days turned into weeks. I helped Aunt Sarah in her garden, planting tomatoes and zucchini in neat rows. The physical work kept my mind occupied, my hands too dirty to reach for the phone and call home again. Aunt Sarah owned a small bakery in town called Sarah's Sweets. She took me there almost daily, teaching me how to measure flour precisely, how to tell when bread dough had risen enough, how to pipe frosting onto cupcakes in perfect swirls. "You have a natural talent for this," she told me one afternoon as I decorated sugar cookies. Her praise felt different from the hollow compliments I occasionally got from my parents. It was specific, genuine. Sometimes I'd ask when my parents were coming back. Aunt Sarah would hesitate, then say, "Soon, sweetie," before changing the subject to something else, a new recipe she wanted to try, or whether I'd like to help her plant the fall bulbs. I called home once a week at first. Mom would answer, sound distracted, tell me they were doing fine and would visit soon. Dad rarely came to the phone. After a month, they started letting the calls go to voicemail. After 2 months, they stopped returning my messages altogether. Despite this, I maintained a stubborn optimism. I told myself they were just busy. They'd show up one day, apologize for the long absence, and take me home where I belonged. When September came, Aunt Sarah enrolled me in the local middle school. Walking into a classroom full of strangers was terrifying, but I forced myself to smile, to introduce myself, to pretend this was all normal and temporary. "Where are your parents?" a girl named Lizzie asked during lunch on the first day. "They're back in Ohio," I answered. "I'm just staying with my aunt for a little while." That's what my cousin Jason said when his mom left him with his grandma, a boy named Tyler chimed in. Turns out she wasn't coming back. She didn't want him anymore. "That's not what happened to me," I snapped, but his words lodged in my chest like splinters. That afternoon, I went straight to Aunt Sarah's bakery after school. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, and the familiar smell of vanilla and cinnamon wrapped around me. Aunt Sarah looked up from behind the counter where she was boxing pastries. One look at my face, and she set aside her work. "What happened?" she asked, guiding me to the small table in the corner. "Are my parents ever coming back for me?" The question burst out before I could stop it. Aunt Sarah's face softened with sadness. She took my hands in hers. "Nellie, I need to tell you something. Your parents, they signed guardianship papers. I've officially adopted you." The truth hit me like a physical blow. My parents hadn't sent me away temporarily. They'd given me up completely. That night, I deleted their phone numbers from my contacts. I was done waiting for calls that never came. Done hoping they'd remember they had a daughter. I threw myself into my new life. Middle school became high school. I made real friends. Lizzie from that first day became my best friend, and Tyler, despite our rough start, became part of our group too. We spent weekends at the mall, summers at the community pool, and countless afternoons in the cozy kitchen above Aunt Sarah's bakery. Aunt Sarah never tried to replace my mother. Instead, she became something better, a mentor, a confidant, a person who saw me for who I was. She never compared me to anyone else or made me feel like I wasn't enough. On holidays and birthdays, I still found myself glancing at my phone, a small part of me expecting it to ring. It never did. No cards, no gifts, not even a text message acknowledging my existence. Each silent milestone solidified the wall I was building between my past and present. By senior year of high school, I rarely thought about my biological family. I'd changed, grown taller, cut my hair short, developed a passion for photography and business. The bakery had become my second home. Aunt Sarah had expanded, opening a second location across town. I worked there after school, learning the business side of things, ordering supplies, managing schedules, balancing books. I want you to understand every aspect of running these bakeries, Aunt Sarah told me one evening as we closed up shop. It'll all be yours one day. I looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? I don't have anyone else. Nellie, you're my family now. The only family that matters to me. Everything I have will go to you. I hugged her fiercely, unable to express how much her words meant to me. She'd chosen me when my own parents hadn't wanted me. After high school graduation, Aunt Sarah handed me an envelope containing a check for college tuition. I've been saving for this since you came to live with me, she said. I attended the state university, 3 hours from home. Business management became my major with a minor in culinary arts. Every other weekend, I drove back to visit Aunt Sarah. By then, she'd opened a third bakery location, turning her small business into a respected local chain. During my junior year of college, everything changed again. I came home for a regular weekend visit to find Aunt Sarah looking pale and thin. Just a bug that's been going around, she insisted when I expressed concern. But I noticed she winced when she reached for things and barely touched her dinner. 2 weeks later, she called me at my dorm. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the fear underneath. The doctors found something, Nellie. Cancer. They've caught it late. Stage 3. I drove home that night, skipping my Friday classes. We sat at the kitchen table, looking over medical pamphlets, discussing treatment options. 2 years, the doctors estimated, with aggressive treatment. I'm not afraid, Aunt Sarah told me, reaching for my hand. I've had a good life, especially these last few years with you. But there are things we need to get in order. She'd already spoken to her lawyer. Everything would go to me, the house, the bakeries, her savings. Not to anyone else, she emphasized. And I knew she meant my father, her only sibling. I took a semester off from college, managing the bakeries while accompanying Aunt Sarah to chemotherapy sessions. When I returned to school, I arranged my schedule to be home 4 days a week. She insisted I finish my degree. I'll be at your graduation, even if they have to wheel me in, she promised. She kept that promise, though by then she was too weak to leave the hospital. The nursing staff set up a video call, and I held my phone up as I crossed the stage, making sure she could see me in my cap and gown. 2 weeks later, she slipped away peacefully in her sleep. I was holding her hand, telling her about new summer recipes I wanted to try at the bakeries. I like to think she heard me. The funeral was small, Aunt Sarah's employees, neighbors, a few friends from her church. I stood beside her casket, accepting condolences from people whose lives she'd touched. I felt numb, adrift without her steady presence. As the service was ending, I noticed 3 figures at the back of the funeral home. My breath caught in my throat. Even after 11 years, I recognized them instantly. My father, mother, and brother. My mother looked older, lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there before. My father's hair had thinned and grayed. And Ethan was no longer the little boy I remembered, but a tall teenager who looked uncomfortably out of place in his dark suit. They approached me slowly, hesitantly. My mother reached out as if to hug me, but I stepped back. We heard about Sarah, my father said awkwardly. We're so sorry, Nellie. We've missed you so much, my mother added, her eyes swelling with tears. I looked at them coolly. Why are you here? You haven't been interested in my life for the past 11 years. They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting such directness. Before they could answer, a man in a dark suit approached us. "Miss Nellie Adams? I'm James Porter, your aunt's attorney. We need to meet regarding the reading of the will." "Are you family members as well?" he asked, looking at my parents. My father straightened. "Yes, I'm Sarah's brother, Robert Adams." The attorney nodded. "Then you should be present too. My office tomorrow at 10 o'clock. As he walked away, I noticed something change in my parents' expressions, a spark of interest, a calculation. In that moment, I understood why they'd suddenly reappeared in my life after all these years. They weren't here for me. They were here for whatever Aunt Sarah might have left behind. The next morning, I arrived at the attorney's office first. I wore a simple black dress, something Aunt Sarah had helped me pick out for business meetings. Professional, she'd called it. Armor, I thought now. My parents and Ethan arrived 5 minutes later. My mother tried again for a hug, which I sidestepped. We sat in uncomfortable silence until Mr. Porter invited us into his office. "Thank you all for coming," he began, opening a thick folder. "I'll get straight to the reading of Sarah Adams' last will and testament." I stared at my hands as he read through the legal preamble. When I glanced up, I caught my parents exchanging glances, my father nodding slightly as if confirming something. "To my niece, Nellie Adams," Mr. Porter continued, "I leave my entire estate, including my residential property at 423 Maple Street, all 3 Sarah's Sweets bakery locations and associated business assets, and my financial accounts totaling approximately $600,000. My mother gasped softly. From the corner of my eye, I saw my father stiffen. "To my brother, Robert Adams," the attorney continued, "I leave my collection of family photographs compiled in an album which is in my possession." Mr. Porter pulled out a large leather-bound album from his desk drawer and slid it across to my father. Miss Adams included a note with this bequest, which I am instructed to read aloud. He adjusted his glasses. "Robert, these are photographs of Nellie from age 12 through her college graduation. I've collected them so you might understand what you lost when you abandoned her. Perhaps seeing the remarkable young woman she's become without your presence will help you recognize the magnitude of your mistake." The room fell silent. My father stared at the photo album, not opening it. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Ethan, who'd barely spoken, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of paperwork and signatures. When it was over, my parents lingered in the parking lot beside my car. "Nellie, please," my mother began. "We need to talk. We've made mistakes," my father added. "Terrible mistakes. But we're still your parents." I laughed then, a sharp sound with no humor in it. "You stopped being my parents the day you dropped me off at Aunt Sarah's and drove away." "We were struggling financially," my mother said quickly. "We couldn't provide for both." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't pretend this was about money. You chose Ethan over me from the day he was born. Leaving me with Aunt Sarah just made it official." My father stepped forward. "We want to make things right, to be a family again." 11 years too late, I replied coldly. For the next few weeks, they persisted. They found my number somehow, calling from different phones when I blocked them. They showed up at the main bakery, trying to talk to me. They sent emails, text messages, even handwritten letters to Aunt Sarah's, my house. They loved me. They claimed they'd made a terrible mistake. They wanted to reconnect, to know the woman I'd become. I ignored it all until a particular letter arrived about a month after the funeral. It was addressed in my mother's handwriting, but the contents were different from her previous messages. "We need financial assistance for Ethan's college education," she stated in her letter. "Even though you may no longer love us, you still don't want to discipline your brother. When all of this occurred, he was only a youngster. You might simply provide him the tuition assistance he needs with your inheritance." Something broke inside of me. I took a seat at Aunt Sarah's former desk and wrote a response. "You separated me from my brother when he was 5 years old," I said in my letter. "You ensured that we never bonded and that we never really became siblings. You can't use a relationship that you ruined to your advantage now." I have no sympathy for Ethan. Not hate, not love, just apathy. I don't know him, and neither do you. If you keep trying to get in touch with me, I'll report you for harassment. I don't care about your money troubles. Once the letter was mailed, the correspondence ceased. I devoted myself to managing the bakeries, carrying on Aunt Sarah's tradition while incorporating my own personal touches. I refurbished the original facility, added extra employees, and changed the menus. I occasionally pondered about them during peaceful periods. If Ethan had managed to enroll in college, whether the house where my parents used to reside was still there, whether they ever felt genuine sorrow for their actions. But as the months went by, those ideas became less frequent. Life continued. In things my aunt would have been proud of, I joined the Chamber of Commerce, kept up close connections, dated periodically, and integrated myself into the community. I was able to bear the pain of losing her, even though it never quite went away. I saw a young woman looking through the window of the original bakery one day as I was shutting it. She appeared to be around 18, with a rucksack, her face unsure. I said, "We're closed," and I opened the door a little. "We open again tomorrow at 7. With hesitation, she said, "Are you Nellie? Nellie Adams?" I gave a wary nod. "My name's Grace," she declared. When I was 10 years old, my mother left me with my grandparents. They informed me of your fate, how you also created a life after being left behind. All I wanted was to meet you. I saw myself 11 years ago when I glanced at her, young, afraid, and making a valiant effort to be courageous. I said, "Come in," and widened the door. I just cooked some cinnamon buns from scratch. As Aunt Sarah used to say, good food and honest conversation can improve everything. I came to a significant realization as we sat at the little table in the corner, the same one where Aunt Sarah had given me the truth all those years before. We don't always end up with the family we were born into. Those who chose us every day are sometimes the ones who genuinely care about us.